Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we're continuing with our shirim on the Mittler Rebbe's Shaar HaYichud, and after a brief hiatus, we're beginning again with chapter Tes Zayin, chapter 16. And just to frame where we're holding in the Seder of the Hishtalshalos, we were discussing last time the worlds of Mahari Sarug, the Kabbalah of Mahari Sarug, the worlds of the Malbush that precede and start far beyond or more anterior to the lights and the worlds of Rav Chaim Vital. And in the world of the Malbush, which is where the Tzimtzum is revealed to be an act of revelation rather than constriction, we stress that the significance of these teachings of Mahari Sarug being joined together with the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital is that the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital is apparently a closed system. It appears that Adam Kadmon is the highest level, and that's the highest that a person can go, and then everything descends down from there. But from that perspective, when we're dealing with an absolute ceiling, so then the question becomes what happens when a person ascends to that point? Have they completed all things? And because the fundamental nature of any system has to be open, because it's always just one step behind the infinite, and it has to always be perpetually growing in itself. So there needs to be something that reveals the relativization of the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital. And that's the Kabbalah of Mahari Sarug, that the worlds of Rav Chaim Vital can be considered the lower elements of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression, which are rooted in the higher elements of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expression, which are the worlds of the Malbush. And that just like any partsuf or any configuration that we encounter in the world of Rav Chaim Vital, which is composed of 10 spheros, which is going to be two compartments of its expression, the Gimel Rishon and the Zayin Tachtonim, the upper three spheros which are refined and the lower seven spheros which are broken. And in the conjunction and the combination of those two compartments of the Gimel Rishon and the Zayin Tachtonim, the three upper and the seven lower, we find the partsuf, which is a contained configuration of 10, which means to say that every seven needs a three to fulfill it. Everything starts off as deficient and must be fulfilled by way of drawing a higher level of expression into it. And seen in the most generalized way, we can look at the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital in the same way, that the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital, the worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzira, and Asiya, can be considered as a Zayin Tachtonim, so to say. It could be considered as a system that is whole in and of itself, but it's deficient in relationship to that which is beyond it. And what are those worlds beyond the tippy top point of Adam Kadmon? Those are going to be the worlds of Mahari Sarug, the world of the Malbish, the world of the Tahhiru Ilah, and the world of Adam Kadmon Stima. Now, the lowest part of those upper worlds is something called the Tahhiru Ilah. The Tahhiru Ilah is the origination point of Nishmas Yisrael. When we say Neshama Shenasat Bi Tahhiruhi, we're rooting ourselves far beyond the worlds of Adam Kadmon, far beyond the inner interiority of Adam Kadmon, but up, up, up in the highest levels of that Avir Panui, of that original air, that the purpose of creation was ultimately for Nishmas Yisrael, and therefore we have to find the traces of the eventual emergence of Nishmas Yisrael, which is the Ruach Apav, which is the breath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to say. We have to be able to find it in the loftiest levels, and that's the Tahhiru Ilah, that Neshama Shenasat Bi Tahhiruhi, the Tahara, the fundamental purity of the soul, is not rooted in its good or bad behaviors, but it's rooted in the fundamental ontology of the soul, which is where it is taken from. And that's from the Tahhiru Ilah. But just as any process between upper levels and lower levels, there has to be an intermediate bridge, a memutza ha-mechaber, that bears a dual quality. On the one hand, it connects itself to the lowest level of the higher level, and on the other hand, it has to connect itself to the highest level of the lower level. This is how the worlds are always interconnected, that the lowest level of the higher world, the floor of the higher world, becomes the ceiling of the lower world. This is the secret of Keser. Keser is the bridge that combines both. It's Atik and Arich. Atik is the lowest of the higher, and Arich is the highest of the lower. And that bridge enables for the continuity between the upper levels and the lower levels, and the fluid flow of the Seder HaHishtalshalos. And so too, when it comes to the transmission of the worlds of Mahari Sarug, those transcendental worlds of the Olam HaMalbush that bring us into the place of the Sha'ashuim Atzmiyim. So the Tahhiru Ilah is the lowest inscription. It's the beginning of the engraving within the inner interiority of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite potential prior to any emergence or actualization. The Tahhiru Ilah is going to be considered the general potential map of how existence is going to look, in spite of the fact that that potential mapping has not separated itself from the Bal Haratzon, the one who is desiring it. Yes, there is the emergence, there is the murmuring of a burgeoning possibility of that which will be revealed in the future in the lower worlds of Adam Kadmon and Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, which take shape after the Kav. At the level of the Tahhiru Ilah, which is the original glyph, the original engraven, the Shiur Ba'atzmuso B'koach Masha Yihiyeh, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu engraved, so to say, within the inner essence of his light, so to say, that which is going to be emergent afterwards. Now, this is prior to a general emergence. This is prior to any emergence. It's just the possibility of emergence beginning to emerge prior to the emergence of its own possibility. It's still fundamentally rooted and bonded with, on every element, the infinitude from whence it comes. That's the Tahhiru Ilah. But then there's going to be another level called the Tahhiru Tata. And the Tahhiru Tata is going to be the lower half of that Tahhiru. The upper half of that Tahhiru, that rarefied, purified space of emptiness and fullness at the same time, the upper half is the lowest part of the higher levels, and the lower half is the highest part of the lower levels. The upper half is the lowest part of the higher levels, and the lower half of the Tahhiru is going to be the highest part of the lower levels. The Tahhiru Ilah is the Malchus of the upper worlds, and the Tahhiru Tata is the Keser of the lower worlds. And so the Tahhiru Ilah represents the edge of the Ilamos of Malbush, but what extends itself into the Metzias of the worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya is going to be referred to as the Tahhiru Tata. The Tahhiru Tata is the bridge in which that which is completely transcendent continues to maintain a fundamental connection with all that is immanent, which reveals the radical secret of transcendence folding itself into immanence, which is the secret of Yichud Ilah expressing itself within Yichud Tata. Now, we know that separating the upper worlds of Mahari Sarug and that Tahhiru Ilah and the lower worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya is going to be the Tzimtzum and the Halal and the revelation of the Rishimu, and then the emergence of the Kav from within the Rishimu, which is why the Kav has the possibility of drawing out infinitude and closing itself off fundamentally, because it's rooted in the infinite, like we saw last time. But once the Kav begins to enter into the Halal, now we're beginning to speak of the graspable worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, the Kutza Shel Yud, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey, those things that are graspable in our reality, those things that are intelligible, the emergence of our worlds. It emerges from that which is unintelligible, from the Tahhiru Ilah, but it undergoes the Tzimtzum, and then we find ourselves in a secondary stage of reality, which is one step removed from the infinite light of revelation. And that's where the unfolding worlds of the Kabbalah of Rav Chaim Vital are going to take shape. But somehow, some way, there needs to be a remainder from the upper worlds, which is going to be the secret of the Tahhiru Tata. And this is what's going to happen, is that we know that once the Kav enters into the Halal, where the Rishimu is uncovered and the potency of all is revealed, so before we begin to talk about the hierarchical territories of the world of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya, that place where our Avodah is possible, there's an initially more immature, fundamentally revealed space called Eigulim. Eigulim are immature to the degree that they're undifferentiated, they're all inclusive, they're all encompassing, they represent a earlier form of fundamental revelation of the infinite, but it's prior to the secret of the infinite remaining infinite even within contraction. The Eigulim, the circles, are like the makifim, those lights that don't necessarily enter into conversation of graspable, fragmented reality, which is all about Yoshar and straight lines. The Eigulim represent those ideals that are ever present, but they're not necessarily activated or activatable within our minds. They're just there. They're ideals that frame the entire system. So that, yes, we know that the purpose is to live in the differentiated secret of Yoshar, which is right, left, and center, and the balance and giving and receiving and the balancing act between the two of them. In the end of the day, all of that differentiation is contained within the general Igul Hagadol, the first instantiation of the shape that the Kav takes when it enters into the Halal. It's mitagel into one all-encompassing circle. And this all-encompassing circle that takes shape within the Halal of the worlds of Marchu of Rav Chaim Vital, which are going to be the graspable worlds, which are a level down, so to say, from the worlds of Mahari Sarug. This Igul Gadol, this Makif HaGadol, the first instantiation of the Kav's engraving, that glyph, that shape in which the Kav begins to take shape, that's going to be the Tahhiru Tata. So we see that the most general surrounding light of the incoming and unfolding systems of the world of Rav Chaim Vital are contained within the Tahhiru Tata, which is the lowest level of the worlds of Mahari Sarug. So we have the Tahhiru Ilah, which is the initial engraving of possibility that's prior to graspability. Then we have the Tahhiru Tata, which is that actual engraving, but it's still makif, it's still surrounding, it's still a circle, it's still far too great or all-encompassing and infinite to be differentiated. That's going to be considered the general perspective of things, but that general perspective of things has already separated itself one step further than the emergence of the possibility of even having a perspective. So there's the potential emergence, which is the Tahhiru Ilah, the actual emergence of it in its most generalized form, which is the Tahhiru Tata. And then within that space and within that general Igul, all of the worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bri Yitzira are going to continue to unfold, and that's going to be the particularization. So we have three stages, the Tahhiru Ilah, the Tahhiru Tata, and the worlds of Ak and Abiyah. The Tahhiru Ilah represents the initial engraving of the possibility of a Ratzon that is far greater than even the most generalized form of Ratzon, because it's not even separate from the one who has the Ratzon. Yes, it has emerged, and yes, that possible emergence is already infinite levels beyond the absolute essence, which is beyond all comprehension and all consideration and all graspability and all possibility of differentiation. So yes, that first level of the Tahhiru Ilah is still an emergence outwards, but it's still fundamentally contained within that unity. It's the Shi'ur Ba'atzmo, it's the glyph, it's the Tahhiru Ilah, it's the original engraving prior to any actual act of engraving. That we can call the klalius of the possibility of Ratzon. It's not a Ratzon yet because it's not separate and apart, but it is that which is going to eventually congeal into Ratzon. It's the emergence of the possibility. Then there's going to be another descent, which is going to be the emergence of that will from potential into actualization, but that's going to be the Tahhiru Tata, which is this all-encompassing Ratzon Klali, a general desire of how things are going to look, a general desire of what I need to do, and that's still prior to the worlds of separation. And then, and only then, in the worlds of separation, in the worlds of Ak and Abiyah, are we going to uncover a particularized Ratzon. So there's three stages of Ratzon. There's the Ratzon before Ratzon, the general Ratzon, and the particularized Ratzon. The will prior to the will towards the will, the general will, and the particularized will. The will before the will is, for example, as we're going to see, like a builder who, before even conceiving of how to build something, has a general image of what that possibility might even look like. It is not yet even a general thought. It's still fundamentally connected to the inner desire itself, and it's not separate so that it can be identified as a plan yet. Then there's going to be the general plan, which is going to be the overview and the blueprints and how everything looks from the bird's eye view. And then there's going to be the application of the particularization of that plan and how to bring it into fruition. So those are the three levels that we're speaking about. In particular, this intermediary level of the Tahhiru Tata, that the Tahhiru Ilah is that general Shir Ba'atzmo, that emergence of potential prior to any form of even potential actualization. Then there's the general Ratzon, and then there's the particularized Ratzon. There's the will before the will, the generalized will, and the particularized will. The desire before desire, the emergence of a general shape of desire, and then the particularization of that desire. What's so fundamental here is that what the Mittler Rebbe is doing is giving us the nodal points along the map of Seder Ashtalshalis, and we're seeing exactly how the upper worlds, which are emergent from within the Rishimu, and those worlds of the Halal HaTzimtzum, which is the secret of Olam HaMalbish and Kadin Kamsa Levush Minei Ubei, how there are nodal points in which, through our hispoineness, through our contemplation and the utilization of these ideas for coming to find more levels of bittul and to understand the Seder HaShtalshalos of Rabbeinu HaArizal in a very clear, very refined, particularized way, this is the map. This is what enables us to cross the boundaries of apparently separate systems and to realize how they interlay one within the other to create one full sweeping system that is growing with every step of the way, with every element of itself. Okay, so now we'll look at the words of the Mittler Rebbe in Parak Tes Zayin in Shaar HaYichud. Each word is a window, each word is a portal, each word is tapping in to draw down. והנה מעט יש להבין בפרטי עניין הקו והחוט זה איך שיש בו בחינס מקיפים ופנימim. Now, once we've discussed the entrance of the Kav into the Halal Hapanui, which is going to be the emergence of the worlds of Adam Kadmon, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, so we have to now understand what it means that there are going to be two categories to lights. There's always going to be two categories. Once we're dealing with the entrance of the Kav into the Tzimtzum, into the Halal HaTzimtzum, we are separating the lights into two categories, Oros Makifim and Oros Pnimim, surrounding lights and internal lights, integrated lights. Surrounding lights are the lights that are so all-saturating that they exceed the vessel, and therefore they extend beyond the vessel, forming a sort of an outer lip to the vessel, having a relationship by way of distance. And the Oros Pnimim are the lights that go into the vessel. We see this much later on in the world of Atzilus by the Shvir Sakelim, but like we're going to be seeing, and like we are seeing, everything is a cycle of differential repetition, so to say, so that everything that we're going to see far lower down on the Seder of the Hashtalshalos can be extrapolated and abstracted back higher and higher to see that in more and more levels of refinement, the farther back we go in abstraction, but the same principles, the same engravings, the same processes are there. They're just more and more refined until the emergence of the Tzimtzum, because the Tzimtzum was still a Tzimtzum Ritzonit. So there's no direct emergence of existence from godliness, God forbid. That was a choice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made. And that choice, so to say, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu made is the highest beginning possible place, the Tzimtzum Ritzonit, the decision for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create the world. That's why we call HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ein Sof and not Ein Tachlis, and not Ein Tchila. We say that there's no end and not that there's no beginning, as the Helagar Mamipano says. Why? Because there is a beginning. There's a beginning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire to, so to say, enter into the possibility of being conceived, which is the Tzimtzum Haritzonit. And that's the highest point in which we're able to get back to. But we can't get back to the Baal Haratzon himself prior to that Tzimtzum Ritzonit. We can only deal with the Ratzon and afterwards. Now, that fundamental Ratzon is fundamentally contained within the Baal Haratzon, so to say, to the degree that the original Ratzon Ha'atzmi, so to say, is expressive of the Baal HaRatzon by way of an impossibility of Tzimtzum. Nevertheless, all we have access to is the Ratzon Ha'elyon, the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Tahhiru Ilah. So there are Makifin and there are Pnimim. As it's written in Eitz Chaim, that when the Kav entered into the Halal, mitagel v'choizer mitagel, it encircled, it circulated the entire Halal, and then it continued to create more and more circles within circles, until within all of those circles emerged the straight lines. B'chinas makif v'igel harishon hu anikra Tahhiru tata. But what's the most general surrounding light? What's the most general, the most external and greatest circle, the first engraving, the first thing that begins to take shape within the Halal is what we refer to as the Tahhiru Tata, the lower half of the Tahhiru, like we said, v'chulei. V'hu b'chinas hamakif haklali. And this is what it's referred to for the entire Seder of the Hishtalshalos, for all of the eventual unfolding of the worlds, this makif haklali, the general circle that contains all things within itself, that maintains the fundamental unity that is dripping down into the closed system of that which takes place within. This encircling is the Tahhiru Tata, which is just the outer lip of the Tahhiru Ilah, which is just the highest levels of the emergence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's revelation. That's the makif haklali shemakif ledalid olamus the atzilus bria yetzira and asiya b'shav kamoshakasav be'etz chaim. This makif klali, this general circle of the Tahhiru Tata, is what circles all of the worlds of atzilus, bria, yetzira, and asiya. Now, the Mittler Rebbe here is not saying ak. He's not saying Adam Kadmon. And it could be, and I'm not certain on this, I'll have to clarify, but it could be that Adam Kadmon itself is not going to be considered one of the worlds that we have graspability to, in spite of the fact that in relation to the Tahhiru Tata, it's contained within the Tahhiru Tata because it's a lower expression, so to say. It takes place later on in the temporal unfolding of things. But nevertheless, because of its refinement, we only deal with the externalization of the Oros of Adam Kadmon, the lights that come out by the time of the Shvira and then the building, and that's what gives shape to the worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. And therefore, it could be that when the Mittler Rebbe is talking over here and saying all of these worlds are contained within the general encircling and those igulim of that Tahhiru Tata, it could be that it's because that the world of Adam Kadmon is not considered a world within the world of Tahhiru Tata. I could be wrong on this, and I have to clarify, and we'll come back to it. But this Tahhiru Tata is the Makif HaKlali to all of the world's Abiyah. Meaning my question is based on the fact that theoretically it should say Ak and Abiyah. It should say Adam Kadmon and Atzilus Bri Yetzira. And the only thing I'm not certain about is that we can say that Be'erech, the world's Adam Kadmon, is not considered a world, and therefore the Mittler Rebbe is just using Atzilus Bri Yetzira and Asiya. But what I'm not certain about is whether there's an identification between the Tahhiru Tata and that Makif and the world of Adam Kadmon to the degree that the Tahhiru Tata is related to Adam Kadmon, and therefore we can't say that it contains other kadmon, so that's what we'll clarify. In order to understand all of this, in order to understand the Tahhiru Tata, in order to understand this general encircling of the Tahhiru Tata, we have to understand the Kav. What's the Kav doing? And like we've said already, the Kav is the general hylic material from which all of existence is going to continue to draw out its vitality. Why? Because the Kav is not separate and apart from the light prior to the Tzimtzum, but rather it is that which draws down the light from before the Tzimtzum, because we said that the Tzimtzum is not a hiding of that light, it's a condensing of that light into a nakuda, into the rishimu, into the secret of Malchus the Ein Sof Kavyachol. And from there, the Kav emerges. So we find that even though it's emerging from an extended point, which is a paradox of all paradoxes, nevertheless, it's an extension of the point, and therefore it holds all of the qualities of the point. And the Kav is the Hiyuli HaKlali. It can express itself in any which way because it's rooted in the fundamental infinite light from before the Tzimtzum. So the Kav is considered that general hylic form, that hylic material, that first expression, L'chol hista'afut hamshachos pratiyim harbe. That this emergence of the klal of the kav, the hiyuli haklali, what it is that it contains within itself all of the lights for all of the eventual unfolding of the worlds down to the lowest possible world, which is olam ha'asiyah. So that the kav, in spite of the fact that it's revealing itself at such a lofty level, because of its hylic nature, because it's a containment of an hamshacha and a drawing forth of the light of the rishimu, so it has all possibilities within itself from the top all the way down to the bottom. And the way that we're going to understand the kav and its general shape and its general ability to apply itself in all different iterations, we can understand it by way of a machshava klalis, a general thought, one full sweeping thought. That this general thought, this Tahhiru Tata, this general thought, the Makif HaKlali, is like a thought that is so unlimited that it contains all of the possible iterations of this thought. The whole general picture from Aleph to Taf, in its full expression. The fantasy, so to say, of imagining the finalized product all at once. In the Lashon of the Rambam, says the Mittler Rebbe, Hainu masha biyedias atzmo yodea es kol hanevraim k'mo shekaseh b'makom acher. That what the Rambam describes in the Mora and in Hilchos Deos is that in the general sweeping thought, so to say, in the sweeping knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu of himself, he also contains and naturally holds the knowledge of all that is going to unfold afterwards. Why? Because in the initial thought is contained all of the eventual unfoldings of the thought, because it's a thought, it's a generalized thought. It's a generalized image, a generalized picture. And so now let's go deeper into this. Bir hadvarim yadua. Before we can understand the Tahhiru Tata, which is the general machshava and the general ratzon, we have to understand how it differentiates itself from its source, which is the Tahhiru Ilah. that the Tahhiru Ilah is also the Ratzon to the creation of the worlds. And now we're saying that the Tahhiru Tata is the general desire for the creation of the worlds. So what's the difference between the two of them? So now the Mittler Rebbe is going to bring us into a basic understanding of the difference between the Ratzon of the Tahhiru Ilah and the Ratzon of the Tahhiru Tata. The Ratzon of the Tahhiru Ilah is not separate from the desiring aspect of the self, so to say. There's the desire that is attached to the desiring self, and it's not separated as a separated general desire. It's just the emergence of the possibility of desire. It's prior to that cutting off from pure possibility and becoming a general desire. And only then is there going to be the generalized desire. So too, lamala kavyachol, that Ratzon ha'elyon in the Tahhiru Ilah is not yet separate from the shoresh ha'ne'elam, and therefore it cannot be considered as an actualized thought, even in the most generalized way, because it has not yet separated itself. Yes, it's the emergence, it's the very beginning, it's the shoresh. It's the shoresh of the shoresh of expression, but it's not yet the shoresh of expression. The shoresh of expression is what unfolds afterwards. That's the general thought. And that's what the Mittler Rebbe is going to give us over here. Ubir hadvar miyadua, sheyesh beis minei ratzon. There's two forms of desire. Ratzon hapashut sheba'atzmus shenichlal ba'atzmuso mamish shelo nikra adayin b'shem b'chinas machshava v'ratzon klali. That first there's the Tahhiru Ilah, which is the general and simplest form of desire as it exists within the essence, so to say, that is contained within the essence, so to say, in literal sense, that it's still not able to be referred to as a thought or a desire, even in the most generalized way, because it is still fundamentally contained within the essence itself. Even though in relationship to the atzmus, this general shape of the emergence of the possibility of desire is still considered an externalization from the essence itself. Or to be applied to something, that this general shape of the Tahhiru Ilah, even if it hasn't emerged, it's still considered a form of emergence. Hagam shemitchaber ratzon hamuchlat hazeh el hispashtus haratzon b'davar prati. And yes, even though that this emergence of the possibility of thought in the Tahhiru Ilah, in spite of the fact that it doesn't emerge into actuality, is still going to find its presence within the drawing down of actuality, that it's going to be connected. So it's still fundamentally contained within its essence. So it's not the essence, but it's not the essence yet. It's the emergence and the murmuring and the potential and the awakening, so to say, and the burgeoning of the possibility of emergence prior to the actual exiting of the self. It's that autogenesis, that emergence from within the self prior to actual emergence. It still can't be differentiated. It's not something that is subject to differentiation yet. It can't be differentiated in a general sense or a particular sense. It's prior to the differentiation between general and particular. Only afterwards does this general kernel of a desire that is yet to emerge as the possibility of an actual desire, only after some time does that desire begin to take shape by way of deciding that this desire should come into actualization in one way or another. At that point, it separates itself, so to say, from the desiring individual themselves, and it becomes an actualized form of desire. But at this point, it's a general shape of desire. Now, at this point, this is the machshava klalis shekoleles kol inyan hamaisa meroish lesof beskira achas. This severing of this emergent possibility of desire into an actualized general form of desire is going to be what the Tahhiru Tata is. And then v'achar kach kishetechalek bo ritzonos pratim l'chol ratzon seichel v'midos v'chulei u'ba'in ze achar ze b'shtalshelis ze elyon makif l'tachton kasher yiyah oifen b'toich ha'oifen v'hu nikra ha'ratzon ha'murkav sheyesh bo b'chal v'prat. That only afterwards, once this particularized desire is extended from the general shape of desire prior to actualization, does that desire express itself into particularized forms in which that desire is going to unfold. So we see that we have three levels of desire. There's the shorish of desire, the potential emergence of desire prior to its actual separation from the desiring self itself, so to say. That's going to be the mashal for the Tahhiru ilah, the emergence of the possibility of a ratzon, but not yet the actualization and the shaping of a ratzon. Then there's going to be the shaping of a ratzon, which is going to be the Tahhiru tata. Then there's going to the particularization of the ratzon, which is going to be the worlds of separation, the worlds of atzilus, bria, yitzir, and asiya. So we have three stages: the shoresh of the shoresh, and the outgrowth. The shoresh of the shoresh is the desire towards desire prior to the actualization of even a most generalized form of desire. It can't yet be said to be the emergence of desire, but it can be picked up on the scale of the beginningness of emergence. And then there's the general shape of the desire, and then there's the particularization of that desire in accordance to its according to its particularity. V'yuvan zal derech mashal. We're going to understand this by way of a metaphor with regards to the self. A known metaphor. Adarach mashal hayadua. Adam sheroitza livnos bayis gadol k'fi haratzon shehuchlet mikvar etzlo lios bo ofanim miuchadim davka sheroitza haratzon hehuchlet etzlo mikvar. That first and foremost, there's going to be the individual who has the general desire, and he decides to build a house. He decides that he wants to build a house in accordance with all of the details that he wants to see in the house. She'osa haratzon shehuchlet etzlo mikvar hagam shu ba b'mida v'tainug miyuchad ba'ofen kach b'kach u'memela b'seichel b'mida es ba b'shir mida ach kol zeh hu hashiur v'hechlet sheba'atzmuso adayin v'nichlo ba'atzmo v'haya kelo haya. The first thought, the first possibility of wanting to build something, the first possibility of imagining something taking shape, even though, yes, it already is entering into the territory of differentiation and definition, but it has not yet even severed itself from me as a desiring self. It's the desire in the process of becoming a possibility. That's referred to as the desire that is still contained within the self. That's nichlal ba'atzmuso. Yes, there's a scale that can pick up the very subtle rumblings of desire, to the degree that there's a wanting that is no longer absolutely simple, but it is yet to sever itself. It is yet to even split into the differentiation between general desire and particularized desire. Then there's going to be the general shape in which I want this desire to be actualized, which is a far lower externalization than that original potential form of desire. And then there's going to be the particularity of desire. So the first expression is going to be this general shape of the mind, which is still considered as if it hasn't even begun to emerge. It's known only to the self. It's contained the shiur v'hahechlet ba'atzmuso adayin. That general shape is still contained within ourselves. Rak kasher la'achar zman ba'a machshava zu lavo lemaisa nikr boi hischalkus oisan ofanim shoinim mamish shekvar huchlat atzlo b'chol prateim. Only after that desire congeals into a general shape of desire do we actually begin to see all of the differentiated expressions in which this desire has to be expressed. Because prior to that second stage of desire, the desire was not perceptible, even to the self itself. It was kilo haya, it was as if it wasn't there. First, there's going to be the Tahhiru tata, which is the general shape of building something. This is the general blueprint, which is rooted in that initial emergence of the possibility. So the Mittler Rebbe says once we're dealing with the emergence of a ratzon that has severed itself from the Bal HaRatzon, at least in a revealed way, so that it can be considered a ratzon, so then we're going to split the ratzon into two elements. There's going to be the general shape of the ratzon, which contains all things and surrounds all things in the most makif and generalized form. That's the Tahhiru tata. That comes from the Tahhiru ilah, the lower part of the Tahhiru ilah. And then there's going to be the particularization of all the particulars down to the lowest particular that can be possibly particularized, and that's going to be the worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. V'dai l'meven. V'animshal mikol zeh. What's the nimshal here? Yuvan lamala behefer shebein bechinas tahhiru ilah bein bechinas tahhiru tata shel achrayat tzimtzum. So the first two stages, the differentiation between the emergence of the possibility of ratzon prior to the actual general shape of the ratzon, is the tahhiru ilah from before the tzimtzum and the tahhiru tata after the tzimtzum. Demasha shir ba'atzmei b'koyach b'tahhiru ilah, that which was measured out, so to say, in a purely potential form within the inner interiority of the infinite light and the tahhiru ilah. That's like that general shape of the desire in its simple form that's still contained within the desiring self, that has not yet even shaped itself into some general shape of a desire. It has not yet expressed itself externally beyond the actual act of desiring itself. And even though, yes, this emergence of desire can be traced back to be the very beginningness of the eventual desire by way of that which is going to come afterwards, and so that we can link this non-desire state to the actualization of desire as the desire begins to congeal. Nevertheless, it still doesn't separate itself. It's still contained entirely within. It's still fundamentally rooted entirely within. This Tahhiru ilah is fundamentally contained, and yes, it is going to be the root of the root, and therefore it's going to be identified as the root, and therefore we have some element of a relationship with it. Nevertheless, as the root of the root, it has never severed itself from the essence itself, and therefore we can't even claim that it's a general shape of a thought that has the ability to be soifu mabit b'skira achas. It's not considered a makif for us, only the Tahhiru tata. Achar ratzon abeis, which is going to be the Tahhiru tata, which is the general shape of a ratzon. Who achar tzimtzum, that takes shape after the tzimtzum, which is the apparent severing between the bal haratzon and the ratzon, so to speak. That this emergence of the potential of desire contains within itself all of the general and possible iterations of that desire. And this is the element of the makif harishon, shehu nikra Tahhiru tata. That's the Tahhiru tata, that's the machshava haklalis. Shazu kamashal ratzon klali lebinyan gadol kol kamasha bepratav miroisha l'sefer b'v'chachas. This is the general shape of a mind, of a thought, of a machshava, of a blueprint that is differentiated in spite of the fact that it contains all of the differentiation within itself. That's the Tahhiru tata. That we can refer to as a general desire. Prior to that, we just had the desire towards desire. And yes, that could be picked up on the very delicate measure where we abstract the outgrowth to its source. But nevertheless, it's not considered as an actual desire because it hasn't separated itself yet. It's prior to the tzimtzum. Only afterwards do we have this general klal gadol, which is the machshava haklali that contains so much that's going to emerge afterwards, everything. And then it emerges into particularity. The world of Atzilus, Ubokol Eser Sfiros, and that's the Eser Sfiros and the Partsufim and all of their particularity. And these three stages of Tahhiru ilah, Tahhiru tata, and the emergence of the possibility through the Kav, this is still not actualization. These are still just the desires, the general shape of the desire, the root of desire, the general shape of the root desire, and then the particularized desire. These are all prior to actualization. Actualization takes place always at the fourth level. Always at the fourth level. And that's the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu has the Ratzon now, Livroa Yesh Me'ayin, to allow for the emergence of worlds. In the world of Atzilus, Seichel Umidos, down to the lowest possible place, down to the lowest place in our worlds. That's the Dir B'Tachtonim. Hakol v'chol hapratim alalu nichlam b'ratzon hakadum shabo b'bechinas hashpa al kolpanim achar at simsim v'hu bechinas reishis hakav. This is the reishis hakav. The Tahhiru tata is the reishis hakav. The reishis hakav, the beginning of the kav, is this general desire that contains all things from the beginning to the end. It's the Ratzon HaKlali that has the world of Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, all contained within it. It's the representation of the emergence of the Kav. It's the Igul Harishon. It's that first encircling, centering, surrounding light that keeps the entire narrative in its place. Sha'achram shachas reishis hakav. It's the Tahhiru tata. It's the first expression of the kav within the halal. That's that hope, that general hope, that general shape of hope. It doesn't have to be particularized. That's the kav hayuli, which is referred to as the makif haklali, the general surrounding light. Lichlos kol dada le'lamis atzilus bri yitzir nasiya. Again, he's focusing on atzilus bri yitzir nasiya. So we have to clarify why ak is not being nichlal. Again, the two possibilities are that it's not nechshav as a world, even though it's contained within the Tahhiru Tata, or that it is part and parcel of the Tahhiru Tata, and that's why it's not being counted. And so we'll see. Shemakav oisam b'shav, it contains all of them in unity. This is what we're affirming when we say Shavisi Hashem lenegdi tamid. The Tahhiru Tata, Neshama shenasata b'Tahhiruhi, above and below, the klal, the prat, it's all the same. Shenikra machshava klalis, shesoifu mabit b'skira achas, miroish l'soif kol. Above, below at once. V'hu bir inyan klali l'klalis inyan akav hazeh. This is the beginning of the emergence of the kav, which is the expression of the makif and the prateofanim b'mashim mitagel v'chayzu mitagel. And then the first circle, and then all of the emergent circles afterwards. Yuvan lefi oifen amashal hanizka le'el k'moshe yisbar b'samuch ba'ezras Hashem v'day l'mevin. And once we've explained the first circle, then we can begin to understand everything that's going to take shape within all of the eventual circles, all of the eventual unfoldings of the worlds. No, these words are Ruach HaKodesh, and we have the ability to take them as the Susei Eish that they are, the horses of fire that can carry us from one place to the next. That reading the words of the tzaddikim, of the Heilige Mittler Rebbe, Rechova Sanar, has the ability to be mamtek everything, mamish, to bring us into Shaar HaYichud, into the gates of unity, Be'ezras Hashem.